Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another special episode of Explode Your Expert Business Show. And today we have a special topic because recently we decided to not just talk about the strictly talking topics about how do you grow your business, how do you get more clients, but we're humans. Stuff happens. And I think one of the missions that we have here in GTeX is to make sure that the voices of our members are heard. And that's something that we've been doing more and more over the years. And this month is June, and it is Pride Month. So we decided to have a few of our members that are part of the LGBTQI plus community and ask them what are their views? Like, what can we do as a business? What does Pride Month mean to them? What are some of the things that maybe there are subconscious biases that people might have or businesses might have that we are not even aware of? And these are all these conversations that we should have so that we can understand each other better. So my intention for this interview is, first of all, to understand better. Is a different word, is a word that I'm not familiar with, and is a word that like any other variety which makes us human needs to be respected and fully appreciated. And that's why we are here today. So I would love to get started introducing our guest today, which is Ian Philip James, Claire Wilding, and Mia Von Loga. So I want to get started with Mia. Mia, quick introduction about yourself, and also what does Pride Month mean to you?
Hi, Simone, and Ian and Claire and everybody out there. Thank you for having this interview. So I want to start with the Pride Month, and then I tell you what I'm about because it's nowadays it is something that I fully celebrate, which I am so proud to be part of, and which makes me happy. And I love that there is acknowledgement and that I can see all these beautiful faces of my community, and that makes me really happy. So it means a lot. It's special to me, and that's it hasn't always been that way, because not that it was something bad, but it was more like an exposure and something that we have to fight for. And it doesn't, it still has elements of that, but I've fully grown into who I am, and that's what I do. That's something that is part of what I'm doing as a coach. So I am a founder and CEO, if you want, of Different. That's part of what I do. And the other one is Beyond Defense. So I've got these two brands, and it's all about empowering your authentic self and live all the colors and to love being different. And so I just feel very comfortable in that rainbow. That's really what I like to show the world through who I am, and want to be part of not only that, but represent that part proudly in the human world. So that's what it is. So
feels there has been like a change of heart from how you were feeling before about Pride Month and how you're feeling now, which
well, no, it's the history of Pride Month as well. There was, if you go back in history, in New York, when the first parade came, started, it was a lot of violence. It was a lot of horrible things these men had to go through, these women also. And now I can see that it has turned into a celebration, and that we've grown stronger as a community. Yeah. And we have like claimed the space, taken up the space that we deserve. And when I said it was a bit difficult for me in the past, it was more like, I don't want to fight for this. Why do I need to fight for my right? Yeah. Like, I'm here already, so why do I need to make the effort by the other stuff? So it was more that. And now I'm just like, well, it's still not great that we have to fight for it, but we're here already. So that's just how it is.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. And next up, we have Ian. Ian, how about you? Interaction of yourself, and what does Pride Month mean to you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ian. and I am a GTeX member. I also help as a GTeX coach, and I help people with accountability, productivity, basically getting stuff done that they've been meaning to do for ages that haven't got around to doing yet. So what does Pride Month mean to me? Pride Month for me is a symbol of visibility, and it is a symbol of instigating conversations, of exploring what we don't know yet, tackling things that haven't been tackled yet, and celebrating things that we got done. It's an interesting concept, having pride in just being who you are. And the conversations that often come around are often very telling in what people don't know yet. So particularly when people start asking questions about the lifestyle choice that LGBTQ people make, and often that instigates a response of, well, it's not actually a lifestyle. Some people choose a particular type of lifestyle, but for some people it's just a matter of their being that's no different to someone having blue eyes or brown eyes. And so that's quite interesting that Pride Month often amplifies conversations that otherwise might not have been had in the open. Mm-hmm. It's also an opportunity to see who is an ally and who is who still sometimes are outright not allies, and also some people who are still on the fence about it. So people might see a rainbow flag in a supermarket who are not from the LGBTQI plus community and be confused about why there's a rainbow flag at a supermarket. What has a supermarket got to do with that? But for someone who is from that community, it actually allows one to think, okay, this company supports that diversity and equal right. So actually I feel safer in this place. I feel that the staff are probably considered more in this place. And so it's a kind of indication of where things are at. In something like sexuality, which is otherwise invisible to the outside world, it enables us to see, okay, this is a safe space for us. So yeah, that's what it means to me.
Well, thank you for sharing, and I have a follow-up question on this, so I'll get back to you in a moment for on this topic, because I want to introduce now Claire Wilding. Over to you, please introduce yourself, and what does Pride Month mean to you?
Hello, thank you, Simone. Thank you, everyone, for today. So yeah, my name is Claire Wilding. As you know, I'm very much an LGBTQIA plus activist, member of the community. I've mentored people, I've supported people through different, parts of their journey through life, and all this sort of thing. And it's something that I love so much about the world, that people have such bravery and such a desire to just be their most authentic self, and why not? Why not is all I would ask for that. That's who you are here to be. So what pride means to me personally is just being able to go out there, live your life, and do it as authentically, as proudly, and as comfortably as you possibly can. Obviously, amongst that as well as safety. The world is a much safer place nowadays because people are asking a lot more questions, because people are having a lot more curiosity, and because people are a lot more open to these conversations that we've previously mentioned already. And that to me is amazing. The world has already come along such a long way so that we can just go along to these events and be part and parcel of the community that we're already in, and it's wonderful to see so many people come together and so many people just celebrating life and celebrating being who they are. And fundamentally, for me, that is what pride is all about. It's just about going out there and loving your life, really. That's what it's about.
There is a common theme that I'm hearing, that I'm listening from all your answers, which is one, a sense of like joy of self-expression. This is who I am. Take me. That's me. But the other part that is a recurring theme is the theme of safety. All of you mentioned, everyone here mentioned, I feel safer to be out there. And in fact, I wanted to go and ask Ian this question. You mentioned businesses, like we're talking, I want to start a conversation talking maybe about businesses. For someone part of the LGBTQI plus community, that rainbow flag means is a safe space that I can be there. So how do you see businesses, Pride Month, where is too much, when is a real sign, hey, I'm with you, I'm here to support you, or when is actually a signs of tokenism? Because it can be a fine line. It can be a fine line. And one of the reasons why, I've always done my inner work generally privately. I generally never talked about Black Lives Matter until last year, about things and where do we stand with GTeX. Never had this type of life before, because I never wanted to be perceived as someone using this situation for something. And I think there is a fine line. So what I wanted to understand from you is, what can businesses do and how important it is for business to create a safe space, but also how do we not go into tokenism?
Yeah, it's a great question, Simone. The first thing is that there is a lot that you can do, and there is a lot that it might not be such a good idea to do. So the first place that I would encourage you to begin is to talk to your LGBTQI plus people and have a conversation about what you're thinking about doing, how that might play out. Interestingly, not only with your LGBTQI community, but also how it may play out with your non-LGBTQI community. There's an interesting balance that I observe, particularly on social media, which is when people say, oh, well, 50% of our staff are LGBTQI. And often what happens in those kind of conversations is then some people say, well, hang on a second, that's a bit unrepresentative. How come you've got so many LGBTQI members of staff? And often what happens is in that space, the intention and the point gets lost. And so what can happen, the ideal thing to do is to talk to people that are experienced and will have seen a lot of those kind of conversations, to say, hey, this might play out like this. You might not get your intention across the line. So your intention might be good, but it might not play out the way that you think it will. The other thing that you can do is, when you're asking for that help, is just check in whether your LGBTQI community want to help you with that. So not everyone's the same. So some people are very keen and proactive and want to help non-LGBTQI plus people to achieve things, and some people are kind of like, I just want to be me, like and I don't really want to just talk with this stuff through all the time. So just ask, hey, would you like to be a part of this? Would you not like to be a part of this? Can I bounce this off you? And just get a feel for it. We're like any humans, right? In that there'll be some people who are up for it, there are some people who are not up for it, and the best thing to do is just ask. In terms of the tokenism, I invite people always to think through the congruency of their actions. So, for example, if you wanted to launch an LGBTQI plus product, well, actually, why is it that you want to do that? Is it because you just want those people to be fans of you or to buy your products, which is bordering on exploitism? Or is it that actually you genuinely want to support this community, and what is it that you want to do to support that community? And the other thing that I would say would be, when you are thinking about that, check your congruency. So it's not okay to say, hey, I've got this tokenistic LGBTQI plus product, but then tomorrow sign a contract with a company that's got questionable backgrounds in how it treats its employees equally. So you've got to check that your congruency goes all the way.
So it's not just about the offer that businesses can put out there, but it's who do they do partnerships with, who do they do business with, because those things matter. And I think to add something as well to the equation, and that's something that happened in a business meeting that I had, I think it was like a couple of years ago. And there has been an homophobic comment that was made towards a person. Now, the person who made it thought it was a joke, but the other person that received the comment, then it was actually gay. Mm-hmm. And I saw that it took it really, really bad. And so one of the things that I struggled with it in that moment, and it took me like I stood out and said something, but it was very difficult. Mm-hmm. And it was difficult because there was the judgment from others and so on. And but now I'm going against and voicing something that we could see, but no one was saying anything. And there are all these moments that I think for someone who is experienced, who's sitting on the other side of the table, you see something happening, even if for you personally it's not easy. Remember that, you know, for the other person is even more difficult. That's what I learned in the exchange that I had also with that person involved. So these are some of the things that we can do as businesses.
A good way to think about it, Simone, is what do you do and how are you when you think no one is looking?
Completely agree with that. It's a very profound statement you just made. Yeah, completely agree. Because it's not just when we're representing and being the face of our brand, it's the brand that we are outside of that is effectively how we authentically are as human beings.
Yeah.
You know, it's very easy. It can be very easy for people to put on a face and to put on a role when they're in the workspace. But the moment that they leave the office, they have very different opinions or very different ways of having those conversations that should really be very much more mindful and mindfully had.
I would love now to jump to a topic of inclusion. And I know, Mia, that you have something to say around that. Because you don't like that word too much. While if you're looking on social media, it's all about being more inclusive, right? Companies' pages, all about being more inclusive. We are inclusive, we are inclusive, we are inclusive. And you say, actually, the word inclusion is not the best word to use. So tell us more about what you think about the topic.
Well, to be fair, that was actually Dan Polly who put that seed into my mind and made me aware of it. So we all, I think, are familiar with Dan as a friend of us. And he actually said one day to me, I'm not using that word anymore. I was like, why is that? And he said, well, fact is, we're here. So you don't need to include us. We are here. So we are, it's like, so it's about cohesion. And if you think about the word inclusion, it means that there's something separated. And that's why I don't like it, because in reality, every day, yes, there are disadvantages. There is not equal rights. There is an inequality. Yet, fact also is we are here. And I'm saying that again, in the whole diversity that who we are. We are here in shapes, and all shapes and forms and colors and genders and identities. And the fact is, we will not get rid of us because we're already here. So, and the question is, do we want to be included? I don't want to be included. I am already a part of it. I want to be acknowledged for who I am. So I want this to be a unity. And that means I include you in my world if you are non-LGBT plus, as much as you please include me into yours. Or I don't actually know if I want to say please, but this is why I am a bit stepping away from the word inclusion. Because I think that's it.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it implies already a separation.
Yeah.
And what you said is switching the word inclusion with being acknowledged. So the question is still with you, Mia. What can businesses do, in your opinion, to acknowledge more members of the LGBTQI plus community within the organization and outside the organization? What are some of the things that people can do and businesses can do?
Okay, so I think first of all it has to start with your personal self. It has to start with the perception, with your mindset towards it, and your education, and that's a fact. It's something where when I am really a person who is eager for equity, equality, let's say unity again, or acknowledgement, then I need to do the work and understand. That means I'm not just walking around trying to figure out if there is someone maybe gay or not. I do it whether I know someone's gay or not. I just do it. And then for example, just relating to what you said about the situation with that joke, whether that person was gay or not, it should be just a value. It should be just something like, okay, no discrimination. We are all equal. That's it. So our values be represented in everything that we do. I do it as a person. I don't only do it when I'm at work. I do it because I fully embrace it. And when you do it, that also means on a business level to go into communication, and even if no one comes to the meeting, set it up. Just, I mean, like bring up the topic, bring it up. Be the leader. If it's a good thing for a lead, to put into leadership, to say, okay, so I live this. Maybe I do an event each month for this underrated group or this underrated group. It's not even only about LGBT plus. It's about understanding that we are so diverse. That you can for GTeX, for example, you can just open it up and say, hey, we have this event and we want to bring people together, and you could actually name it that way and say, and this is the topic of the event. This is like, we want to bring people together, and we want to be brave to be open and talk about things openly. And what you want to share, you do share. What you don't want to share, that's also fair. Understand and make, because it's an emotional process. Like, help people to accept that people who've come from anyhow on the way and in a disadvantaged path, that they probably had some challenges. And understanding that means they have their individual story, that they had to overcome some things. And that also means that and that's why I like equity more, that they do have not the same starting points and not the same, I don't know the English word for it, like the same, let's just say advantages. They don't have the same.
Yeah,
you get it, right? If you've got
they don't have the same starting point.
So understand that, and then just opening your mind to that. And for the other parts, also say, hey, be open to support each other, to come together. And that is something, I think if you bring this mentality and this culture into a business where we can all feel safe and all can feel open about who we are. Now I'm getting goosebumps now. Then the best thing's gonna happen is that it will probably work if you stand up as a leader, and that you would just make it happen, because the ones who are not aligned, that would probably leave. And let me just spare one more sentence, because I talked about the personal level. So if you want to show that as a corporate, that also means that you have to accept, if you really, really mean it, to do something that not brings you any benefit. That actually puts out something where you put a lot of money into an event, and you're not a sponsor, you don't get nothing, no cent, no penny out of it. And you might have some other loss, but you accept it because you say, I believe in this.
You do because you believe in it. You do because you care about it, not because of what the financial return that can come back to you.
Yeah.
Which goes back to the idea of tokenism as well. Is like, okay, what can you do to show that you really care, and not just care for PR or publicity? Or
yes, of course. I mean, there are some, in that way you can, to really mean it, say, okay, I'm going to work with suppliers, employees, marketing, public supporting, all that, what you mentioned before.
Yeah,
but I mean, in general, and the corporate idea of value, to say, this is what we want to support. and we
Yeah.
do.
So I want to move on to Claire now, because we talked about creating spaces for communication, but there are situations in which communication can be too much communication. Because on one side, we are encouraged to ask questions. We are encouraged to learn from someone who is different from us. And that's how we learn, by having these conversations. But what are, I think that sometimes we can blur the line between something that can then makes you feel very uncomfortable, or makes us feel very uncomfortable. So Claire, what are your thoughts around this topic?
All right, thank you for asking that. Actually, I've got plenty of experiences that I can draw upon for that particular question. And one of the main ones was actually when I first started to come out. This was about, how old am I? It's about 7 years ago now. And I'd known for a very long time. It had been very much in my consciousness. It was kind of building up. It felt like a big unfulfilled hole inside of me. And I thought, no, I need to do this. I know this is right. I know this is who I am. I need to do this. So anyway, when I began that process, I didn't go about it half-heartedly at all. I was very open. I was very authentic. I was very myself. But it did actually seem to welcome some very unsolicited questions. Throughout those earlier days of me actually starting to say, do you know what? Yeah, I like women, and X, Y, and Z. And these unsolicited questions actually seem to be anything from, so how do you know? Which can be a very innocent sounding question. But when it's then leading on to, oh, well, how do you know? Like, if you've never slept with a bloke. And I thought that was very assumptive, first and foremost, because we've all had our journeys, we've all had our experiences. But who is that person, quite often a stranger to me, to ask me those sort of questions from just meeting me? You know, and quite often I found it was usually male, usually a male person, and usually someone who, I don't know, may or may not have been showing an interest in me. Obviously I was completely oblivious to the case if it was, but they always found it appropriate from their side to ask me these very unsolicited questions.
Yep.
And how do you feel about having children? How would you go about that? You know, how do you feel about marriage and all this sort of thing? And I would always turn around to them and say, do you know what, first and foremost, that's a very personal subject. I don't think it's really appropriate that you should go around asking people those sort of things right off the bat, because it's a time, it's a place, it's at a stage in your life when those conversations seem very relevant to be having. And with all due respect, I would much rather be having those conversations with my partner at the time than someone that I just happened to have met, you know, for a moment. And it's getting people, without it being, you know, too shoved in their faces, you know, it's getting people to appreciate that it's not appropriate to go around asking people questions about their personal life, certainly not when you're just meeting them. Because how I always turn it around on them actually now. I always think, how would you feel if I asked you if you wanted to get married? How would you feel if I asked you whether or not you wanted to have children? You know, it's not something that is necessarily cool, is it? For what?
Yeah, no, it's like I don't know you.
Yeah,
There are certain conversation that I can have later.
Yeah, and sometimes I get asked questions like, I used to find whenever I walked into a new role, you know, obviously there would be people who were parents who would naturally ask me if I had children, and I would turn around and say, no, I don't have children. But then on some level it would shut the conversation off, and it would be like, you know, obviously because they've got a family outside of this environment, that is all they really know how to talk about. They're very passionate, very loving towards their family, of course, and I've kind of naturally ended that conversation. But if it were to go into you know, how would you have children in the future, all that sort of thing, it would be relevant. It wouldn't be, oh okay, we don't have children, oh yeah, oh, you know, well, is that something you want? You know, it's how it's put, it's how it's approached, and it's whether or not it is appropriate for that point in time, as to whether or not I feel comfortable to answer that question.
Yeah, remember, you're not talking to like to a scientific experiment. It's not. Is another human being. Treat them like another human being. It's like, don't ask questions you don't like to be asked yourself at different stages.
Sometimes I used to like turning it around on them, saying, "Well, I'm actually a sister as well, and an auntie, and a daughter, and all these other things I can talk about, you know."
I know Ian wanted to jump in on the topic. Ian?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, couple of things. You already touched on it, Claire and Simone, but just really advice for people if they're interested is when you're thinking about asking a question to an LGBTQI+ person, before you ask it, reverse it and ask it back on yourself to test the personal feeling or the absurdity of what you might when someone, so for example, to give Claire's example, when someone says, well, have you ever tried it with a of the opposite sex, if someone asked you that, how would you react to that? And if the answer is like, well, duh, then there's your answer right there.
That's a great point.
And it's funny because especially if you have a very, very straight or seemingly straight male asking you these questions, have you ever tried it with another bloke? Like, it seems really rude.
and they'd probably be horrified, and whatever reaction they're feeling inside to that is the equivalent reaction that we would be feeling. And the other thing on that is to consider the sensitivity as well, because sometimes when people ask, say for example, about like, oh, you know, what about family or what about children and stuff like that, if you knew that a couple were trying to have a child together, would you continue to press them and say, yeah, but have you tried this and have you tried that and how do you feel? And something that people don't often realize is, or I talk about my experience here, is that when I was growing up as like a kid, like in my 10 years old, 12 years old and stuff like that, I had the same picture in my house, in my head, as everybody else: a wife, kids, family and stuff like that. And it was quite a crushing experience for me in my teens to acknowledge that that might not happen for me. That actually the idea of having a beautiful wife and a house and a couple of lovely children, like for me, that was like a really traumatic experience to understand that that might not happen to me, and that was going to be a lot more complex for me if I wanted it than normal people. And so when people say like, well, what have you thought about having kids and stuff like that, it's a pretty traumatic conversation. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, just quickly, I think this is a very important point to touch on, the sensitivity. And again, I'm going back to educate yourself. There are also books and videos, and like you can find a lot of resources to understand a community or a group, a social group, more than just asking a person. So and then it's like you can gather a lot of information from that, and you have to and I'm looking at from a different point, because I can be in the other group, right? I am in, like I have I'm a white person, so I have to do my work and understand and educate myself. I cannot just go randomly to someone who's not white, who's a non-white person, and say, hey, can you just tell me all about this, because I don't know how to educate myself. That's not on. I need to do that part. And then go, if I do this, and I know, like Claire said, if I know this person, I might be able to ask, hey, is it I would really love to understand a little bit more, and I don't want you to be my dummy, but is there a possibility, do you feel like comfortable with us having a conversation? That is that you can ask, permission.
Having that permission makes all the difference, and then you can decide, say, hey, no, not right now, this is not the right moment.
Yes.
Or
and that boundary, the follow-up to say, if I don't want to talk about it, just don't be, don't be mad at me. Just let me know. It's like, because that could be a follow-up reaction. It's like, oh, you don't even, it's like, now how am I supposed to learn about it if you don't talk to me about it? It's like, okay, it's still my private.
Yeah, but you're not like a human textbook, are you? Like, I'm very fortunate in that I've always had a very inquisitive mind. I've loved to learn about other people and other people's backgrounds, especially people who are different to myself. And it's meant that I've had a very wide, eclectic and diverse social life, but I don't necessarily go and interrogate the people that I know about certain subjects because it doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem like something that I would feel comfortable doing. It's certainly not something I would feel comfortable asking people about in terms of, like, I don't know, having a biological sex change. It feels like something that's a little bit, too personal to just outright ask someone about. So I do think, certainly in the case of what you just said, asking in a respect of curiosity.
Yeah.
So I might start that conversation if I was genuinely curious and say, actually, I'm curious. Would you mind if I ask you about this? And then with their permission going forward, I would ask them the question. But the person has to be in the right headspace to begin with.
Yeah.
They have to be in a receptive frame of mind and also willing to share that information. You have to have built up a level of comfort with people. If it's a friend, I would feel much more comfortable asking a friend or someone that I knew well enough to think they might be quite comfortable with telling me that information rather than just a random person, but it's how you approach the subject.
Is the entire context, and how do you approach the subject, how do you approach the person, and to summarize it, make sure if you're really interested, Google. There is something called Google, or you don't know, you don't just have other human beings that you can ask questions. Do your due diligence, and then ask questions, get to know people, and you will find that by approaching someone in a sensitive way, like you would like to be approached, knowing that the topic is sensitive, because you're asking them about their sexual nature. I mean, that's what we're talking about. It's not like the sexual nature, their mind is their heart, is their soul, is their being. So anytime you ask a question like this, it's hey, it's just do your due diligence, learn some of it, and then ask with permission. Now, there are two questions I have, and I know we are running a bit over, but if that's okay for you, I would love to ask you these two more questions. One is around generational gaps. And I found, like, and the question is, and I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. Actually, let me tell you why I'm asking the question. I'll tell you the question. And I was in Italy recently, and I had a conversation with an old member of my family, and it was around the gay marriages and gay having kids, and that there was a mention that, like, the poor kid, and that broke my heart hearing that, because like how selfish that can be. And there was that conversation from the members, like they know they're not going to fit into society and so on. And I was like, wow. Now, having said that, she's also 90 years old, which is a very different time from the time in which we are in now, and being grown up with very different values. And from your perspective, which I'm sure that those things that I've just mentioned hurt like crazy, and that's my assumption, I imagine that, but where do you draw the line of, you know what, there is no point in changing that mind of someone that is part of a generation that they couldn't possibly understand? Or how would you have, or if you want to have that conversation, how would you have that conversation? That's I would love to ask you, and I don't know if who wants to get started answering this question.
I mean,
Claire. There are Claire and then Mia.
So I just got started then. I've certainly had a generational experience myself, and it was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. The particular relative that I have in mind is very, very traditional, very, very, I want to say straight-laced, very, very, like, almost like the matriarch of my family. So you can imagine someone whose opinion would actually make a difference, or the response to what I was going to tell them would actually make a difference. Now, I found that when the time came, it was a big family event that was going on. I brought my partner at the time, introduced them, and it was a case of, oh, it's lovely to meet you, you know, and just a comfortable level of conversation. And this relative looked at me and went, I'm proud of you. Like, I'm really proud of you. And obviously I'm very comfortable within my sexuality. I'm very comfortable with being out and proud about it. But on this particular occasion, it did actually make me think this would make a difference if the response wasn't necessarily a pleasant one. Now, the only thing that really comes to mind now about this particular relative, they're very receptive, they're very curious, they're very, you know, like, conversations happen, they're very, very comfortable. It doesn't make a difference whatsoever. But the only thing that I would notice is the tendency to say the word friend when referring to my partner. Now, this can have mixed reactions, of course. You know, it's better than saying, oh, no, they're not coming with you. You know, I'm not having it, this, that, and the other. But it's also the difference in what the relationship is and how the relationship is portrayed.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not it's just the fact of making themselves comfortable, which,
Yeah.
you know.
Wow.
So that, for me, is certainly something that I have experienced. But on another generational level, I would say that, say, around my mum's generation. Now, my mum's in her 50s, bless her. So anywhere sort of between people in their 40s and their 50s, I would say that there's an awful lot of opening of minds, because people are experiencing their children or their grandchildren being a lot more open and a lot more bold and brave about who they are within this generation. That they're actually naturally saying, do you know what, you're my child, you're my grandchild, regardless of who you are. And I'm curious to meet this person who you are and support them in anything that they do. So there is still that level of curiosity, which I'm fully for.
Okay.
And I will certainly encourage people to have that attitude, to learn, to go away, to do their research, but to also support the people that are in the world nowadays and just being their most authentic
So
self.
there is like the generations are changing, and
Yeah, there is.
I want to hear from Mia now, because she had something to say as well. Yeah, Mia.
Well, I think, first of all, you said that this person said, "Oh, the poor child, you know, it's not going to fit into society." I think my first reaction is, well, you don't have to say it's a poor child. You have to say, what a poor society, right? Because it's like, if that child is not, you know, it's like raised with love, then it's a poor society. So instead of discussing it out, and it's like you said, well, what's the sense and what's the goal here? In this particular case today, I would probably just say it anyway. Say, well, you know, I don't, you know, you could have said something like, well, I don't think it's a poor child. Society's changing. That's good, because it was a poor society before. Because, you know, if a child is, you know, is there, it should get love and acknowledgement. And so just don't try to discuss it with someone to the end, but stick to your truth. And there's a personal experience I have with my grandmother, and it was actually about mixed race babies. And she was like, well, you know, the poor child, she it wasn't the exact phrasing, but it was similar. And I was like, why do you think that? And she was like, well, how can it identify? And I stepped back and was like, okay, I try to understand his thoughts. I'm not saying I approve them, but I try to understand them. And then I said to her, so what if we all had mixed babies, and it wouldn't matter, because we would all be different colors, and we would all be colors, or maybe we would all be the same color at one point. You know, it's like, it's the approach to say that any child is poor is only when it's not healthy, and not even then I know if it's a poor child, because thinking about that, it's like the gift of life is so precious. But to talk about it in a different way and not go down the path, but just say, you know, maybe changing perspective a bit, but sticking to the truth. This is
Yeah. That's exactly the conversation, not exactly, but that's very similar to the conversation that I had, saying, I think my point was, society has moved on. Fortunately, what wasn't considered as acceptable before, now fortunately it is, and is celebrated. Not everywhere, not in every country in the world. There are a lot of parts where it's not, but at least where we're living right now, it is, and that's the context in which we are talking. So I don't know, Ian, do you all want to, before I ask the last question, do you want to contribute to this particular conversation, or?
Yeah, sure. First of all, it's like there are open-minded people and closed-minded people in all generations. So there are young people today who are very unwelcoming and who would ask similar questions and say similar things. But also, like, I remember when I told my gran I was gay and this is my boyfriend, she's like, "Oh, that's nice, dear." Anyway, we have dinner. It was just like a non-event for her. So it's, it's more common, I think, in older generations to not understand it. And again, I would invite people, rather than to be cross or upset with other people, is just to open the conversation and open the dialogue and just ask searching questions. So in the same way that, as Mia has said, is actually it's quite helpful if other people do the work, or it's quite helpful if people get curious and interested. In the same way, there is also a responsibility on us as a community to also be curious, sensitive, and do some work as well. So actually, why shouldn't I do some work to understand why people might feel like that of a particular generation? Why would I not seek permission of that other person? Say, hey, would it be okay if I just kind of examined that comment a little bit more? What is it exactly that you mean by that? Okay, and why do you think that person might be a poor child? I'd really like to understand what this means in your world, because that way we can step into and meet each other and have a really good dialogue about it, as opposed to, you don't know what you're talking about, you're wrong, you're old, and things like that. All of these things are likely to kind of create a deeper divergence.
Yeah,
definitely. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for putting light. It has been a very enlightening conversation, I gotta say, and I'm sure that everyone who is going to watch the video, or is watching the video, or is going to listen to the podcast, then you will have something to think about here, in the way you can act differently, in the way you can support, in the way you can be an ally, which not just on Pride Month, but something that goes beyond. And in fact, that's the final question. And I will ask you to answer in a very succinct way, as we're running out of time now. But to wrap up, what is that can be done, like one thing each, that can be done to celebrate the LGBTQI plus community beyond Pride Month? Let me start with Ian.
It would be to call out discriminatory behaviour whenever you see it. If it's with friends, family, business, if you see it, call it out, even when it's hard.
If you see it, call it out, even when it's hard. Thank you. How about Claire?
Never be afraid to be authentic and to be yourself. You are you. There's only one of you. You were put on this planet for a reason. So honestly, self-love, self-preservation is absolutely key. And if people don't like something about you, a problem with you, more with them more than it is with you.
And they can get your t-shirt.
And they can buy a t-shirt.
Awesome. How about you, Mia?
I think this is a really difficult question to answer. I would pin it down to something that is more like a mindset, like like a mind. Yeah, I don't like the word set either, but like I found a sentence once, and it changed my whole openness towards people and towards myself and for the situation happening. and that is accept everyone as a teacher. So whatever happens, if you have a situation, then to like, you know, according to what the other two beautiful beings said, to say, well, if there is a situation where there would be support. If you have like a difficult conversation, if somebody is discriminated, take the situation as given, but see it and take everyone in there, including yourself as a teacher, for what you can learn and what others can learn. And then have enough courage to follow through with that truth.
Wow.
Find that and find the courage. Wow. It's been an incredible conversation. So quick round, how can people get in touch with you? Mia, you can start.
You can find me not on Facebook anymore because my account got hacked, so I would just skip that out. So you can find me on Instagram at Mia Von Loga, and also you can go to my website. That's different.coach or beyonddefense.net, and then I'm gonna get your authentic self flourishing out there.
Awesome. All the contacts are going to be in the show notes, so make sure you scroll down and check them out. Ian, how about you? How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can contact me via the GTeX coaches page, or alternatively my Facebook, which is Ian Philip James, and I'll be happy to chat things through if anybody wants anything.
Awesome. Thank you, Ian. Claire, how about you?
Oh, well, you can certainly find me under Phoenix Rise Life Coaching on Facebook. You can find me on phoenixrisecoaching@gmail.com, or of course get in touch with me via the GTeX community, and I am honestly happy to help you live a full, flourishing life and be the best you that you can be.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Mia, for being here and having this conversation with us. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Always remember that together we grow exponentially. Ciao.
Simone, thanks. Thank you.